Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson
Let
Show.
me check my internet connection.
Oh, okay, no worries. Well, you know what? We'll wait. We'll wait. And I will tell everyone that we will begin probably at 1. But you predicted that you and Dwight, I saw him yesterday, he sends his warmest regards to you.
Oh, I really like Dwight. Yeah,
Oh, my goodness.
he's a really interesting guy.
Oh, my goodness. I said, okay, you two prophets. You all predicted that this, this was coming. And no one wanted to hear you. My
Yeah.
goodness. And I will wait for him because I don't want him to test it while we're on the air. Hey everybody. Hey everybody. I need you to thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Like and share, like and share. How you doing? How you doing? In this hour, we're going to be talking about really a hodgepodge of things. Of course, the Trump inauguration is tomorrow. And hey, Velma, how you doing, sweetie? Much respect and love to you, my friend. We're going to be talking about not only the Trump inauguration, but mass deportations, the TikTok ban, what that means. I'm really going to go into depth in that in the next hour. But we're also looking at, we got a lot that we're looking at. We've got to look at, of course, all of this is happening with Dr. King's birthday as the backdrop. How about that? And everything that he foresaw. Uh, we're going into. So, you know what, Dr. Gibbs? I'm going to go on and get started.
All right.
So we can go on in 5. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you today. Wow, it's the inauguration. Who would have thought we'd be here? Well, this gentleman who's on with me right now said it some couple of years ago. Not that this was something that he was wishing for. It's just all the signs were there. The corporate media, I think, has been misleading us into believing that President Trump and that for which he stands is far less popular. And it really is. And it's not even about him anymore. When you have a figure this popular, of course he's charismatic. You can't deny that. And his people really are very, very attached to him. But they're attached to what he represents. And that's what happens with all of these charismatic figures who come around these very, very interesting periods in our lives. When you've got leaders telling you that things are not as bad as you think they are, and you cannot afford a dozen eggs, you can't afford to send your children to college, you can't afford your rent, you can't get out of student debt. You just, it's like you can't get out from under. And even when all things are going your way, when the wind is at your back, you are an illness away from bankruptcy in the United States. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. And he's giving voice to it. Whether he does something about it or not, well, that's a whole different kettle of fish. But we have to be honest about why we are here, why the 45th president will be sworn in as we are, as you're watching this. He will be sworn in at the top of the day, today. How did that happen? And tomorrow, the mass deportations will take place. They're going to have a special focus on Chicago. What will that look like? What will that look like? Many people are volunteering to leave the United States. There is a lot of fear out here. We're watching workforces uh, that are disappearing because people want to get out of the United States. They're frightened to death. Got to talk about that and the TikTok ban. How did that happen? And what will be the political fallout? 170 million Americans, that's half of us, have TikTok. And many small businesses are doing quite well because of TikTok. How did we get here? Got a lot to talk about today, and the Democrats are looking for new leadership. But as they look for new leadership, do they know where they went wrong? That is part of the question, too. Well, I can't wait to hear from you, Dr. David Gibbs, as we await the rest of our guests who are coming up. But I'm glad to have you to myself right now. And of course, we're on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Please meet me on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Hey, Kenneth, Melvin, Mike, Miss Velma. Please go to the Santita Jackson and Friends page and like and share right now. Go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. I'm on Blue Sky. santitajackson.bsky.social, santitajackson.bsky.social, and X at Santita J. So let's get right to it. Here we are. You said we'd be here. Let me ask you, what is it that you saw? And Dwight McKee, of course, a regular on our show. I saw him yesterday, just so that you know, and everybody, he is recovering very nicely, and we just continue to keep him lifted up in prayer. Um, what did you see that so many people missed? I can understand the American public missing Donald Trump possibly winning, Dr. Gibbs, because you had the corporate media telling you that there was no way that he could, that he was so unpopular. And oh my goodness, Kamala Harris has broken through in Iowa and she is leading him in Iowa. I said, I live in Chicago. Iowa is up the road. It's kind of hard for me to believe, everybody. It really is, because there's too much going on here right now. Too much. So talk to me. What did you see? What did you see that most of us just didn't catch?
Well, one of the things that the mainstream media is losing readership right and left, even before, I mean, since the election, even more so. Before the election, there was a long-standing decline in the media. I have to say, a long-standing decline in the quality of what you read in things like the New York Times and the Washington Post. I guess even, let me say, I'm not a Trumper, and at least in 2020, I'll just be honest about this, I did vote for Biden. The vicious nature of what you were reading, that just routine denunciations of Trump, it just got so repetitive, it became really boring. So the quality of and reliability of the media was declining. I don't think they realized how much the public was becoming alienated. When I'm seeing that, it's very impressive to me, is that a major source of information people are getting now, it's not just social media, but podcasts. I mean, this one, for example. Just on a podcast the other day with this guy from Switzerland, and my sense is a lot of people are moving to things like podcasts and social media, just because it's a new technology, and new technology often does tend to attract new people, especially younger people, but also because the mainstream media just is not doing a very good job, and so I think the reliability was very open to question here, and a certain amount of insulation from the public and wishful thinking was part of what you were getting here. More specifically, I think what you had an economy that was really a lot weaker than people wanted to think. That basically wages were down. I think that what people looked at was that you had full employment. We did have full employment. The employment was very high and very strong. Did have growth in the economy, and usually when you have those things, people are doing better. But this is a case where they were not. Wages were down for most people. Living standards were down for most people. Inflation. The inflation that we had. It mostly resulted from the fact that you had a concentration of wealth during COVID, and then when the COVID lockdown was over, you had a spending spurt by people who had money, which is mostly the top 10% of the population. And they went out and they just opened their wallets and started spending. And that was the main source of inflation. There have been studies on this that are quite convincing on that. So basically the rich got richer and everyone else suffered from it. And that was something, let me say, Biden did have some positive features in his policy. He made some baby steps that inched away from the policies of neoliberalism, but they're only baby steps. They were not enough to compensate from these trends I just mentioned. And there are other things he was doing that I think were alienating the public. The two wars in the Middle East and Ukraine, I think, have become deeply unpopular as new forever wars. We were supposed to have a glorious victory in Ukraine, and it's just gone on. And most of the indications now are Russia's were going to win in the end. And how much did that cost us exactly? How many tens of billions or hundreds of billions did we spend on this? And it raised food prices because Russia and Ukraine are some of the world's biggest exporters of grain and fertilizer. And so that was another factor that made Biden unpopular. The mass killings in Gaza, the terrible, horrible mass killings we've been seeing, being made possible by American support and American weapons, that was not a good look. So there's so many things that went wrong. Oh, I should add, by the way, that the image that the Democrats were trying to present that democracy is on the line here, that they emphasized the attack on the Capitol of January 6th. This is all true, and I myself was very appalled, of course, as many were, by the attack on the Capitol. And there are legitimate concerns about Trump's anti-authoritarian tendencies, and that's all true. But the Democrats have also shown some authoritarian tendencies. You know, you're going to talk later about the banning of TikTok. I mean, that's deeply authoritarian. Taking a social media venue widely used by tens of millions of people, especially young people, and banning it like that, that's extraordinary. And generally speaking, the Democrats have opted for heavy emphasis on censorship, often on ways that straddle, if not outright violate the First Amendment. And so they also look authoritarian. So you might say you're in a situation where neither side looks very good. Neither candidate was very popular, but in the end, people slightly preferred Trump. And it seemed to me, I could see this coming I didn't have a crystal ball, and I wasn't making this prediction with any degree of certainty, but to me, like there was a good chance Trump was going to be reelected. And I don't take pleasure in that because I don't think he's a good person or going to be a good president. But nevertheless, it's what I think people preferred this option over the alternative. And here we are. I mean, of course, there are other things as well, very unsavory things. There's no doubt. There's an element of bigotry. There's always been an element of bigotry. Trump has always appealed to that, the dark of people's psyche. But that's not the only factor. And I think people shouldn't reduce it exclusively to bigotry, because I think that it ignores the fact that I think about a third of black men under 30 voted for Trump. Personally, I think they made a mistake. I don't think that was a good idea. But they had their reasons. We all have our reasons. And Trump did actually pretty well among people of color for a Republican. And so it's very difficult to reduce Trumpism to one single factor. But I think that, generally speaking, he was an anti-establishment figure, and people were very tired of the establishment.
Well, you know, we're talking with Dr. David Gibbs, author of The Revolt of the Rich. And boy, are they taking their revenge. I mean, this is the most billionaire-heavy cabinet ever seen. And I heard someone frame Elon Musk this way, and I thought it was interesting and true, that he's the richest, publicly, he's the richest man in the world.
I think that's correct.
Publicly.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's correct?
My understanding is, again, I wouldn't swear in court to this, but I believe he does have the highest net worth of any individual. It's always hard to estimate that because they're very rich of ways of hiding their funds. But yes, I mean, of course, Trump is very closely aligned, not just with Elon Musk, with a whole range of billionaires. I should add, there were certainly billionaires backing the Democrats, and overall, probably more of them backed the Democrats because I think they see Trump as unstable and they don't like his instability.
But they're perfectly willing. Even they are perfectly willing to play ball with him because that's the way politics works.
That's the way it works. Well, he's going to be president. They have no choice. And everybody tends to understand that. And they, business people gravitate towards whoever is in charge. As a general point, I mean, one of the things we will see almost certainly is massive deregulation. I'm assuming this DOGE committee and government efficiency run by Elon Musk and also by Ramaswamy, who also I think is not a billionaire, but what is he worth, 600 million? So he's up there in his net worth. And these are people I think who are deeply committed to deregulation in a way that is likely to further advantage business and concentrate wealth. A lot of the working class people who voted for Trump, they made a mistake in a lot of ways. Voting for Trump, I don't think it was a good idea because they're very likely to see a decline in their living standards under Trump. There's likely to be additional concentration of wealth under the Republicans. One thing that I think is Trump is generally not predictable. We were talking about that. In many things, he's unpredictable. On economic policy, he tends to follow a very standard Republican playbook about tax cuts for the rich and for big business and for deregulation. And that's what he did in his first term. It doesn't seem like he was pressured into it. I think that's what he really wanted to do, and that's very likely what he's going to do now. So these will be very standard Republican policies with regard to specifically economic policy, and I do not think they'll produce good results.
Dr. Gibbs, what do you make of um, the mass deportations that are supposed to begin on Tuesday, the day after?
I could be wrong about this. My guess is that Trump's going to back down on at least some of that, just because it would be so disruptive economically, and it would be such a problem for major industries that the economy depends upon, and that Trump may very well have been supported by. So I'd be surprised if he goes as far. Trump tends to use a lot of blustery rhetoric and may take very dramatic positions in public and then back down. He's done this repeatedly over a whole series of things. And my guess, I could be wrong. My guess is that he's not going to go anywhere near as far with regard to these deportations as he's claiming he will. But I don't have a crystal ball, and I can't say that with any degree of certainty.
But why do you think, is this a tactic that he's using?
There's no doubt.
Or is he blinking?
Biden, I think it's both. Biden went very far along the road of open borders, not literally open borders, but allowing very high levels of immigration in a way that, it must be said, has been deeply unpopular with large segments of the public. There's no doubt that a perception of quote unquote excessive immigration was one of the reasons Trump won. The polls show that. Second to the economy, immigration was the second most important issue in terms of people's decision to vote for Trump. And so, he's taking a position that's going to be very popular. Now, if he actually acts on it, we have massive disruption in the economy as a result. Well, that could be very damaging for his image. And so my guess is he's going to back down. He never is really committed to any policy position. It's very difficult to hold him to account because, again, he's always insisted on his flexibility, his deal-making characteristic, come up with some kind of a deal, and he can justify it that way. I just don't see him going all the way on this issue, just because it doesn't seem like that would be in his interest to do so.
Where do you think? But he's put too much fear out there with the American public, and there he is curried so much resentment toward these people.
Yes, he has. They're eating cats and dogs and that kind of thing. We all remember that.
Yeah, it's going on and on and on, and I think that's socially unsustainable because it really has us at each other's throats.
Well, Trump has been very, very good at doing that. It's always been a Republican specialty, is dividing people. And Trump has followed in that. I remember Spiro T. Agnew. I'm old enough to remember Spiro T. Agnew, Nixon's vice president. And he said, dividing the public is, he said, I'm often accused of dividing the public, and I enthusiastically plead guilty to that. He was proud of it. And so that's what we do here. That's what the Republicans do anyway. And immigration has been something that has been a very effective wedge issue for the Republicans and particularly for Trump. I mean, remember with regard to Mexican immigrants, he said, they're criminals, they're rapists. That's a pretty strong thing to say. On the other hand, it must be said that a lot of people, including Mexican immigrants, recent immigrants, do have some mixed feelings about immigration. So this is more broadly popular than I think a lot of people want to believe.
It's just interesting to me, though, because President Trump's own background is so interesting. He's been married to two women who were not born in the United States.
Yeah.
And in fact, Ivana Trump, I found, did not become a citizen until all of their children were born. It doesn't make them anchor babies, but it almost does. Just the way he rails on about, and Melania Trump, I found out, I was surprised, is a dual citizen.
I didn't know that. That must be an awkward detail. I'm surprised the Democrats didn't make more of that.
They said nothing. They didn't touch it.
That's
And so is their son.
interesting. Interesting. Um, well, that's not a very nationalistic, "Make America Great Again" thing to do, or "America First." It doesn't fit into any of that. Um, but again, I think that Trump does have a kind of Teflon image. He said himself, "I could go out and shoot somebody in the street, and it wouldn't stop me." And well, that's maybe an exaggeration, but the general point holds. He certainly gets away with quite a bit in terms of inconsistency.
I don't think it was an exaggeration, because I think that people, as I bring up Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds, I think when people I think people are almost desperate, Dr. Gibbs.
Yeah,
because you would agree with that. Why?
I think that there are a couple of things here. We've had basically declining living standards for most people for almost half a century.
Mm-hmm.
And there's deep resentment of that. I think a major turning point was the 2008 crash.
Mm-hmm.
People, including a lot of people who vote Republican, became deeply alienated from the kind of capitalism we've been seeing here and started becoming much more open to alternative economic visions. Another alienating factor has been the after effects of the war on terror. Many people, we discussed this before, many people enthusiastically supported the war on terror, went overseas to fight, they volunteered. And they became very, very deeply alienated from this process, seeing that they've been conned to fight for the rich, to fight for oil companies. And it became an endless war. And there was all sorts of lying about weapons of mass destruction, about everything else associated with it. And so you had people on the right adopting positions that are traditionally associated with the left.
Yeah.
And somehow or another, we've had two candidates that have triangulated that issue. One, as I mentioned, was Bernie Sanders. The other was Donald Trump. And there's a lot of interchange between the two in terms of votes. And a significant number of people voted once for Bernie Sanders and then ended up voting for Trump.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are surprised about that. I am not. Both of these were anti-system candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Bernie Sanders appealed to the better angels of their nature, as Lincoln put it. Trump appealed to the worse angels of their nature, but both of them were anti-system. And many of them had the same kind of appeal in a strange way.
Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds, we are, as we record on Sunday, when people hear this, Donald Trump will be hours away from being sworn in as President of the United States. Dr. Gibbs and Robert Patillo, Attorney Robert Patillo, and Dr. D. Dwight McKee took a lot of hits, if you will, because they said a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago, we're on track for this to happen. I think that the corporate media misled people. They tried to really just talk past everybody and their feelings and their lived experiences. And so now here we are, on the verge of another Trump presidency, and yet he's also doing the unexpected. When he said last week, if they don't get a deal, Hamas is going to be very sorry, and everybody else will be too. I said, what is he doing? And he didn't back away from that. And there's a lot of speculation about the backstory on that, but you see these people moving with a quickness. I don't know what this is. I don't know where this is going, but if it goes to not just a ceasefire, but peace and justice, please get on with it. I applaud it. The mass deportations, of course, you don't want people here illegally. But it's always something. It's always that ointment, that fly in the ointment, Dr. Gibbs and State Representative Ron Reynolds, head of the Black Caucus there, Black Legislative Caucus. And so, and there's this tension with the Black and brown community, right? Shouldn't be, because we all ought to be coming together, but there is this tension there. But what's missing is how these people, we're driving people out of Venezuela. Because we'd like Venezuela to be without Venezuelans, so we can get that oil. Like we wanted Libya without Libyans, so we can get that oil. We destabilize these countries. That's what we continue to do, and and now we've got Tuesday with these promised mass deportations, and they targeted Chicago, which is where I live. I'm wondering what that's going to look like, but they have like 150 agents who have volunteered, I guess, to conduct these raids. I don't know what that's going to look like, and certainly when if you all live in condominiums, buildings, if you go to work, what's that going to look like? There was this play that was out 50 years ago. It was called The Day of Absence. It was set in a sleepy southern town and during segregation, and white people woke up and all black people were gone. I just saw them trying to figure out who's going to make the breakfast, something as mundane as that, to basically who's going to help me keep my life together. So, I mean, so what do you make of this new Trump presidency that's here? We can't count our chickens before they hatch, but we're upon it. I mean, what are you hearing from people? And particularly given that you are in Texas, Dr. Gibbs, in this state, I mean, because your governor's been sending all the migrants everywhere, and he's in on it. What are you hearing, seeing, feeling? Because people are feeling some kind of way about this now. Everybody's very nervous.
They really are. But first of all, I have to own up to something, Santita. I have to have my confession. This is Sunday. I have to give my confession. I have to confess that I thought Dr. Gibbs was wrong. I thought he was out of his mind. I thought he predicted this when there were not really any polls that were saying, I said, what is he talking about? You know, I know there are concerns, but all these things are happening. The momentum is growing. Dr. Gibbs, I got to give it to you. You were sound, you were accurate, and you were on point. And you always did it from a political scientist standpoint, not with emotions or partisanship, but just calling balls and strikes. And I want to just commend you. And it was always very insightful. I just thought you were going to be wrong. I was looking forward to say, yeah, I told you so. But I had to get that out, Santita, because Dr. Gibbs was consistent and he gave salient points. And he was one of the few outside of those, just Kool-Aid drinkers that were just saying stuff to say it, that was actually on the right side of the issues. Having said that, now my conscience is clear. I've had my confession, but I've been waiting to do this, Santita. Honestly, really, I gotta get with Dwight McGee too. I gotta eat some crow with Dwight too next. I gotta eat crow with Dwight. So but,
no sauce, no salt, no pepper,
yeah.
No seasoning. You got to just eat it.
Yeah, I know. Hey, listen, I'm a man to admit when I'm wrong, right? I don't have a revenge history. Yeah. So having said that, Santita, let me say there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of angst. There's a lot of worry. People are petrified. I know some of my Hispanic brethren that have family that are undocumented, and they are sick to their stomachs, right? They're very concerned about their loved ones. Many of these people have been contributing to our Texas economy. Many of them have been working, doing lawn service, doing construction. They have been providing many goods and services and being very good citizens in our community. And so they know that there's not a difference a lot of times when it comes to those who are criminals and those who are not criminals. They're brown, they're Hispanic, they're Latin, and they're undocumented, and they're going to get swept all together. So and they should be rightfully concerned because there's so many vigilantes, Santita, Dr. Gibbs, that are in Texas that want to go back to the Wild Wild West where they rope these people and they treat them inhumanely and they, deport them. And so we saw this when the Haitian refugees came to Texas, and you saw the image I'll never forget of those immigration officials on horseback. Yeah, with the lasso. You remember that?
No, you know what?
Do you remember that?
Black people. It was a flash. I mean, it was like a trigger. I mean, because you were like, wait a minute,
it was a trigger back to slavery.
This is looking like feeling like slavery, and
It
so
looked like
people ran. Even the
it
Kennedys ran
did.
down. They were like, "Whoa, hold it! This is this is crazy." Do you think
Yeah,
that's what we're
but
going to see
but
without?
Governor Abbott
Oh,
Oh my
was
goodness!
technical problems.
supportive of that.
Do you think we're going to see that? I mean, that replayed now.
So yeah, it's very
It's okay. Just keep going, Representative Reynolds. Oh, it froze.
I'm yeah, I'm
Oh well.
He's having. Oh boy! But let me ask you,
All right.
because that image was something that seared
Yeah.
the minds of everybody. Okay, because I think for the most part, and people don't want to go back to that.
I think that again, I could be wrong. My guess is that Trump would have an incentive not to get things like that get out of hand. It's simply for this reason. He got an enormous percentage of the Hispanic vote, a majority of Hispanic males, and I think total was something like 45% of Hispanics. It's
Yeah.
better than a Republican candidate that president has done in a long time. And so my guess would be that in places like Arizona, where I live, there are people, Hispanics, who voted for Trump who do want some limits on immigration, particularly legal immigration. But they start seeing mass roundups that look really horrific, and suggest something in like South Africa in the days of apartheid, or Mississippi in the bad old days kind of thing. That would ruin Trump's reputation in a key constituency. So I'm hoping that will at least reduce the possibility of any kind of really large-scale human rights abuses. But then again, I don't really know.
Well, I just, I'm wondering, and I'm wondering aloud because the atmosphere it's so toxic.
It is. Oh yes, very toxic.
That it feels like Luigi Mangione was not a one-off. There is you know what I mean. And I'm not hoping for that.
I do.
I'm saying, you guys, would you read the tea leaves? There is so much anger out here.
Yep.
And it's everywhere. You feel it.
You do. I have a lot of friends and even family who've been glorifying Luigi Mangione, and I think it's a mistake. I don't have any. In truth, I don't really have a lot of sympathy for corporate executives, but the idea of killing them.
Oh no.
That's it's a terrible thing, and it's a terrible precedent. And if you establish basically you can kill a corporate executive, who else can you kill? Is the obvious. Where does it stop exactly? Let's not forget there have been 2 assassination attempts against Donald Trump himself.
Oh yeah.
And so all of this is not a good sign. And so there's definitely a very toxic atmosphere in the country right now. Donald Trump has contributed to it, although I have to say the Democrats contributed to it as well. I think that one of the other issues to note is that all the efforts made by the Democrats to indict, impeach, remove from the ballot Donald Trump, first of all, I don't think it did one iota of damage to him politically. I think it helped him. All along, I thought all these efforts to attack him legally rather than politically, it will only have the effect of increasing Republican turnout and making Trump look like a martyr and make the Democrats look like the ones who are trying to abuse the justice system for political ends, which is to some extent what they were doing. And I couldn't believe how they do it not once, but again and again and again and again, not learning from their mistakes, not thinking, not looking before they leaped, without any restraint at all. All of it basically suggests to me that both sides of the political spectrum are a little bit unhinged. And it's a very dangerous situation.
When you say both sides are unhinged, what do you mean?
Well, from the Republican Party, you're getting all sorts of crazy authoritarian statements, all sorts of ugly denunciations of immigrants, for example, about Haitians eating pets and so on. That was very unpleasant to listen to, especially since it was basically just a fabrication. And people are very right to be worried about Trump doing something like, let us say, the January 6th attack on the Capitol. If he did that, what else is he capable of doing? Those are legitimate concerns, in my view. On the other hand, the Democrats have weaponized the justice system. The Republicans are right about that. The charge of which Trump was convicted in New York was so obviously politicized and politically motivated, and was so clearly brought against Trump because his name was Donald Trump and for no other reason, and that he was running for president. All of these things, I like to say that it's only one side, or mainly one side, that is engaging in these sort of illegitimate, undemocratic, sort of authoritarian acts, but that's not the case. I'd say we have a situation where we have some equality of blame to go around here.
But so where do you see the American public going? I mean, because the plurality of Americans are self-declared independent. I mean, and I'm asking you this in this context. The Democrats are now looking for new leadership.
Yes. I think.
Or should I say a new face? I don't know if they're looking for new leadership. I don't know about that. Because I don't see, because it's the same, with a few notable exceptions, it's the same group. And I'm like,
I agree. What bothers me is there's been very little self-criticism or any awareness that they've done anything wrong. We need, I do have to say, Seth Moulton was making a legitimate point that the Democrats got a little too overboard on this transgender stuff, which, it's not a question. I mean, I agree people should be allowed to live their lives as they want to. And if they want to have a transgender lifestyle, that's harmless behavior and they deserve protection and respect. And but the idea basically of we all have to sit down and relearn our pronouns and relearn the English language. And it was getting a little crazy. And there's no doubt in my mind that contributed to the defeat of the Democrats. But there's no sense of analyzing that issue. Moulton was attacked. There was a petition to have him, forced into resignation and so on and so forth. That's the way the Democrats handle things. That's the way, I'm sorry to say, the activist left, where I come from, that's the way that we handle things. And basically is to denounce and not debate, and have very rigid, dogmatic positions. You will not change, never learning from your mistakes, even after defeat after defeat, never learning from your mistakes. That seems to be the mantra of the Democrats as well now. And that's very dangerous. I haven't seen any serious self-criticism coming from the Democrats. That, okay, we had Trump, and now we have him again. And the question is, what did we do wrong? Obviously, quite a bit, just on the evidence. But there's no admission that there's anything. The bottom line is this. After the 2016 election, which is a disaster for the Democrats, the entire leadership of the Democratic Party should have resigned, in my view. We should never have heard from Hillary Clinton ever again, honestly, because she lost an election she wasn't supposed to lose. Pelosi, Schumer, the whole lot of them should have resigned. That would have been the honorable thing to do, and get new leadership who would reassess and get a serious self-assessment of what did we do wrong. Of course, the Democrats didn't do that. And 8 years later, they still haven't done that. As far as I could tell, they have no intention of doing that. And so
there's no self-awareness. No, I'm just underscoring your point. There's no self-awareness. More than that, there's a disconnection between the party elders and the donor class, the administrators of the party and the people.
That's right. Exactly right.
There's no connection. I'm like, but to show you that there is no connection, they threw out 14 million votes.
I was very impressed by how bad, honestly, Kamala Harris's advertisements were, and that they relied so heavily on major Hollywood stars like Julia Roberts and George Clooney. And I don't think they realized how elitist and out of touch that made them look. There was, there was a lot of complaint that men aren't voting for the Democrats. But the problem was they didn't really give men a good reason to vote for them. They didn't really give women very good reason to vote for them either, honestly. This was a very upper crust, upper class kind of appeal. And I don't think the Democrats, they're so out of touch. I don't think there's even awareness of this. I have to say Trump's advertisements were much more effective. I mean, I didn't like them. They were kind of demagogic, but they were effective. And it indicated to me Trump was much more in touch, and his people his staff were much more in touch with the mood of the country. The Democrats were. And so I'm just very impressed by how the Democrats seem to not only be out of touch with the country's mood, they're proud of it, and they will insist that they will make no changes.
See, that's why I'm concerned about this new election selection of Democratic leadership, because it seems to me that they're doing the same thing. They're looking for the same types of leaders. They're looking to do the same thing when and they're turning their voters, they're turning not just their voters, they're turning voters off.
Yep.
You know, and Republicans are turning them on.
Yes.
I mean, those who are willing to buy into the two-party system. If they have to choose, the Republicans are growing and the Democrats are contracting.
I think that the main factor that's going to determine Trump's success and the future success of the Republican Party are going to be, well, a number of things. But I think the most important will be, of course, the economy. It's always the economy stupid. And to the extent to which you can produce some kind of not only increase in growth, but also increase in wages, real wages, is going to be critical for him. And secondly, how he handles these numerous wars that have started, and the Democrats, frankly, have handled very badly indeed. And I suspect one of the reasons Trump did establish a ceasefire, which may or may not last, but he did establish the ceasefire. It seems, according to the Israeli press, it was Trump, not Biden, who played the leading role in making this possible. What I'm reading into that is Trump sees the Middle East wars as a quagmire for him, and as something that simply cannot go well for him if it continues. I think he has probably figured out that Netanyahu is a deeply manipulative figure. Trump is too, by the way, but nevertheless, I'm looking at this from Trump's standpoint here. And so I think he may have some interest in trying to at least distance himself from the Netanyahu government and try and resolve the wars. Whether he can or not is another matter. On Ukraine, I think what he's facing, what Trump is facing, what the U.S. is facing, is the fact that Russia's going to win the war, and there's probably nothing the U.S. can do to stop it. I think it'll take a few months for Trump to fully appreciate that fact, but I think once he does, he may see it in his interest to simply disengage and say, we're doing America first here. And that means we're not getting involved in this war any further. Let the Europeans handle it. And he will disengage. I honestly think that's the hopeful scenario, just because there's simply no way the U.S. can avoid a Russian victory in this war. And the sooner we recognize that fact, the better.
Well, I'm wondering, well, who knows? Everything is shifting so quickly, and who knows? Trump might be the guy to surprise us.
It's always possible. One of the
I don't know.
It occurred to me with regard to the Middle East, there's a Nixon going to China moment, in the sense that Nixon was able to go to China and recognize China because he had been a hardline, not just anti-communist, but anti-Chinese communist. He was bitterly anti-Chinese, always dead set against recognition for China. So he had political cover of his right flank on that issue. So he could do it, whereas the Democrat couldn't. That was the line, and no doubt there was a lot of truth in that. Well, perhaps Trump will be able to make peace in the Middle East, just because he has so much cover, because he was so staunch in his support of Israel, that he was going to be even more pro-Israel than Biden. I don't think that was possible, because Biden gave Israel everything they wanted. So I don't think it would be possible for the U.S. to be more pro-Israel than Biden was. But nevertheless, that was his rhetoric. And given that rhetoric, he may have some political cover to have some maneuver room. This is the optimistic scenario. I'm not saying it's going to play out that way. I'm just saying there's at least a possibility if one wants to view it from a more optimistic standpoint.
But it's the hypocrisy that concerns me, and that is just so stunning to me. When I look at Vivek Ramaswamy's background, you could almost call him an anchor baby.
Oh, yes.
When you look at, and he has used affirmative action, he's benefited from it, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. He's benefited from all of that. But then we have a first lady who's a dual citizen. I don't know if that's ever happened before.
I've never heard of it.
Corporate media have gone right past that. They don't say anything.
That's true. Although it's also true that even if they emphasized it, people would just shrug and vote for Trump anyway. And so it could be that it wouldn't have made any difference. I suspect it wouldn't have made any difference, honestly. Maybe it should.
I mean, I'm just wondering, how does that work? Because
Why does he get away with it? How does Trump get away with it?
no, just no. How is it that because beyond Trump getting away with it, I think what is concerning to me is that the corporate media get away with it because
Well,
they're supposed to. I mean, they know how to kill someone's career. They do.
oh yes, they do. That's right. That's true. And they're trying to do it right up, particularly with Tulsi Gabbard. They seem to really hate Tulsi Gabbard's guts.
They
Um,
hate her.
they really do. More than anybody else, more than Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is fine as far as they're concerned. But not Tulsi Gabbard. I think what I would say is now Noam Chomsky has always said the mass media reflects a political agenda. Of course it does. It manufactures consent. If one wants to be cynical about it, one could say the corporate media simply lies all the time, which it does. I mean, that's one of the lessons from Chomsky's scholarship on this. But I think one thing that we've seen is they at least made a pretense of, they weren't Democrat or Republican to the extent that they are today. The mainstream media, the Washington Post, the New York Times, when I read editorials in there or just the news, well, that's what it is, the news page, I feel like I'm reading press releases from the Democratic National Committee.
Oh.
And the problem is it gets very boring. I mean, Trump is this, he's that, he's the other thing. Sometimes it's true, but just we've heard that for 8 years. And just
Look, I'm
why
tired
do we hear it?
Dr. Gibbs, I am so tired of that. I am so tired of them looking at his personality.
Oh, yes.
I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted of that.
And he said something outrageous, and they have a scandal for days. He said something outrageous. It just gets very tiring, yes.
It's tiring and it's disingenuous.
Mm-hmm.
Because quite frankly, Dr. Gibbs, all of these, anyone who thinks that they could be president of the United States and occupy the most powerful office on earth, you have to have an ego. You have to be a different kind of person. First of all, to even run, to be in leadership, you're a different kind of person. You're not like everybody else. And you know what? That's okay. I can deal with the quirks. You're a brilliant man. I already know that you are quirky because that's look, it comes with it. I'm looking at all the books behind you. Americans don't read. Look at us. I mean, look. You're a different kind of guy. You need your space. You need your time. You love your solitude. That's different. I'm a musician. I get it. Because, if I got to shut the door, learn music or shut the door and read, and that's fine. And I love my solitude. Okay. But so dwelling on his personality and not looking at the policies, that concerns me. And I think we are in a hole now.
I think what concerns me is even more than that is that there's very little curiosity or interest as to why people vote for Donald Trump.
No.
There isn't a sense of really going up to people and saying, okay, you voted for Donald Trump. Why did you vote for him? And taking them seriously. Mm-hmm. It seems that what you want to do is basically, I hear this from my friends all the time. I don't really always like it, is that these people are ignorant. They're stupid. They're this, they're that. And it gets very elitist, first of all, because a lot of it is, the polls do show this. A lot of the people who vote for Trump have lower educations and lower incomes. And this is, Democrats have become much more kind of a posh party. And so this does have a certain snobbery to it, that we're just looking down at those dirty, smelly proles and taking openly undemocratic positions that maybe they shouldn't be allowed to vote. I don't know. People haven't quite said that, but there's almost an implication of that. And I really don't like that. And it also just reflects a mental refusal to take seriously the fact that there are people angry out there, and Trump taps into their anger very effectively. And that we need to have a better understanding of the people who voted for Trump and why they voted for him. And the press is pretty much resolutely refusing to engage in that exercise. I don't know. That's my take on it. How do you see that?
I feel that way.
Yeah.
I do. And it's just very concerning to me because I feel like we don't have a press anymore.
Yeah.
and taking out TikTok, which we'll talk about in the next hour, trying to close the portals, I just see that increasing the anger of people because
Oh, yes. Oh,
people,
yes.
they just went over to Red Dot. Then they went over to Lemon 8, and Lemon 8 was closed to you. I'm wondering where the all of this goes somewhere. That's my point.
I think
Now,
a lot of it is basically there's a lot of irrationality on both sides, including one of them is that the Democrats and sort of the mainstream, the establishment, everybody, have come up with this explanation for Trumpism that it's due to disinformation, especially from abroad, especially from Russia. And that's why we have Trumpism, because we have all this disinformation out there. And so what we have to do is crack down on disinformation through censorship and repression. And there isn't really any real evidence or any serious evidence that I've seen to support this view that that's where all this comes from. Russia's, as far as I could tell, they have no significant influence on the U.S. public efforts. There have been academic studies of this on Russian Facebook campaigns had no influence on people's attitudes. There were 3 different studies on this, came up with the same conclusion. And so there isn't a shred of evidence, really, to support any of this idea that disinformation is the source of Trumpism. And in the whole idea of censorship, all it does is, first of all, it's outrageous in principle. It's a violation of at least the principle of the First Amendment. Often, I would say the wording of the First Amendment in some cases. The ban of TikTok is shocking in my view. I don't use that word lightly, and I don't like to say things like that normally, but this is an extreme case. And it reflects kind of that both parties are moving in this authoritarian direction, and the Democrats are every bit as guilty of this as the Republicans, and I don't say that lightly.
well, they're moving with the oligarchy, right? They're giving them cover.
That seems to be the basic thing, is that basically the oligarchy, I do assume that, yes, I take a kind of Marxist view of this. There's a ruling class composed of people with a very, top 1% or maybe top 1/10 of 1% of the country. And yeah, they do often call the shots in this country, quietly, often behind the scenes, but they call the shots. And there does seem to be.
George Carlin said it. I mean, he said it. He said,
I'm sorry, who said it?
George Carlin said it. He said, look, there is a party, y'all, and you're not invited to it.
Yeah, that's right. George Carlin.
To paraphrase him, it's true.
Yeah, no, he had some excellent monologues on that.
Points, and that's my only point. I've got 1 minute left.
All right.
Thank you for staying with me. But help me to. What should we be looking at as we just in this moment? Because everyone is so. Oh my gosh, people are. Instead of being upset, my brother, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, is going to the inauguration. He said, I want him to look me in my eye and know that I will fight him. He said, he said, if anything, I'm inspired to push.
Yeah.
My position, I'm not going to retreat. I don't have the luxury of that. Reverend Ike used to say, I don't have the luxury of a negative thought. I don't have it.
Yeah.
We don't. Your final thought.
Well, I think what this country has always needed, and a lot of these silly culture wars over woke and all that kind of thing prevent this, distract us. What we need is kind of a working class party, an authentic working class party that represents working people. We don't really have that. Trump mobilizes the working class based on a lot of demagoguery. The Democrats ignore the working class, or frankly dislike it, even detest it, disparage it. We have this whole group of people here who we need is a kind of multiracial working class party. I think that was, this is, we have coming up here, we have Martin Luther King's birthday, and we really need to take into account, I think there's no doubt that towards the end of his life especially, that's what he was sort of moving towards, is that kind of a model. And that's what we've needed and have not had in this country. And so if there's one final thought, I would think that, we need to move beyond these culture war issues. We do need to move, at least, I don't know, move beyond is the right word, but basically get over the racial divisions to the extent that we can form that kind of a party and that kind of a movement. And that really is, I think, what people really want and are not getting.
And I think we're going to bump into it.
I hope so.
You know, I think so. I think so. I think so. Hope springs eternal. And as I watch people moving and thinking and looking around and saying, you know what, wait a minute, we're all divided here. My father put it this way: we came over here on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. Whether you like it or not, everybody, we're family, and we got to work this out. Our lives depend upon it. Dr. David Gibbs, if you want to understand why we are where we are, get his book, The Revolt of the Rich, because we're seeing this writ large right now. Let's talk about TikTok coming up in this next hour. What happened? Why did this happen? Many people say that they are censoring content from the Middle East, but they're censoring content from everywhere, and a lot of businesses depend upon this. And did you know that the Carlyle Group owns a big stake of TikTok? Everybody's looking at the Chinese government, but no one's looking at this company that President George H.W. Bush helped to found. All right, everybody. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show. In just a few minutes, Dr. David Gibbs, get the book, The Revolt of the Rich. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Back in a minute.